subscribe to the new podcast. Thanks a lot, bye. This case takes place in the UK in the year 1982, involving a man who would become known as the Phantom of the Forest, a man who sparked one of the UK's largest manhunts. PC David Haig was 29 years old and working the early shift in Harrogate, North Yorkshire on the 17th of June, 1982. As part of his routine's duties, PC David Haig drove southwest to a countryside location called Northwood Edge, known for its steep hill climb. Whilst he was driving past a wooded park area, he spotted a man sitting in his car. Something about this man made PC David curious, so he drove into the car park and stopped near a green Citroen saloon car. He got out of his vehicle and approached the driver, clipboard in hand. David began talking to the man in the car, but during this conversation, this man pulled out a pistol and shot PC David Haig in the head. This man then fled the scene, leaving little evidence behind besides spent ballistics. When David didn't answer his radio to a colleague, an officer was sent to his last known location to check if everything was okay. This officer then arrived to the scene, and they found its driver's door open, with PC David Haig lying on the ground. He immediately sent for assistance. The officer saw that on David's clipboard, he had managed to write a name, date of birth, and a registration number. The words read, Clive Jones, born the 18th of October 1944, Leeds, and the license plate number, KYF326P. The name on the clipboard was circulated through national systems, yet no trace came back. Tragically, for PC David, there was nothing that could be done, and he was pronounced dead at the scene. With the murder of a police officer, investigators got to work right away. Officers began taking details from people who were nearby at the time, and they soon learned that there was a car in the car park at around 6:35 AM that morning. It was reported by multiple people that the car was a green Citroen saloon. The car's license plate was eventually tracked to a previous sale located in London a year ago. The man who owned this car was named Clive Jones. However, there was no record of this Clive Jones. The police now believed that this was an alias. Detectives tried to understand what happened at the scene. The single shot to the head suggested a calm approach and a controlled ability with a gun. Evidence was collected, and they found that the gun used was a .22 caliber pistol. They had a car model, a gun model, and now a highly motivated police force were looking for someone who shot and killed their own. However, they knew that this person was extremely dangerous. 2 days later, on the 19th of June, a tractor driver had seen smoke from the edge of a cornfield. Upon closer inspection, they found that the smoke was coming from a green Citroen car that had been set ablaze. The police were called, and it was a match to the car that was written down on the clipboard. This was the killer's car. Investigators got to work to try and recover as much evidence as they possibly could, and thankfully, they were able to retrieve a fingerprint. But in the meantime, this killer was on the loose and was heading for his next victim. But before that, on the 20th of June, this killer entered a cottage in Torksey in Lincolnshire and tied up the homeowner, Frida Jackson, who was 75 years old. The killer tied her up and stole her money. However, he reassured her that she wouldn't die. He told her that the milkman or breadman would find her the following morning. And indeed, the following morning, neighbours noticed that Frida didn't pick up her milk delivery from outside her porch, and so neighbours became worried and called the police. They entered to find Frida tied up. She survived the night and had the story to tell. But at this time, this offence was not linked to the killing of the police officer because of the distance between the crime scenes. So again, this mysterious criminal was on the loose and started heading across the country. The killer managed to make his way toward Girton, Nottingham for his next interaction with innocent civilians. Just before dawn on the 23rd of June, the same gunman forced his way into a house. The sequence of events was brief and brutal. This killer had quietly removed a window pane from a back door and unlocked it from the inside. When he entered this house, he made his way to the two residents, George Luckett, aged 52, and his wife Sylvia, aged 50. He caught them both by surprise rounded them both up, and bound them together by the elbows with a cord he found on the kitchen table. But this time, he wasn't leaving these two to be found. Instead, he raised his pistol and shot each of them in the head. Tragically, George died on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood. But miraculously, Sylvia managed to survive the shot to the head. After the killer left, Sylvia managed to crawl to the neighbour's house. The neighbour then called the police and a paramedic. Sylvia was in a horrific state. Despite surviving, she was left with lasting brain damage and a shattered memory. The police soon arrived at the scene, and they began asking people if they had noticed anything suspicious, and it turned out that some people had. They had seen a brown Rover with the license plates VAU 875S. The car had been idling in the lane for some time. The police sent out messages to other police forces in the country, informing them about the murders, and they shared the colour, make, model and license plates of the car that the killer was in. But by the time the alert spread, the killer had changed the license plates, and he was about to strike again. On the 24th of June, the killer was stopped by PC Ken Oliver in Dalby Forest, North Yorkshire. Ken was a dog handler on a routine patrol when he pulled over a brown Rover that matched the description given by other police forces. As Ken approached the vehicle, the killer didn't hesitate. He shot him in the face with a .22 caliber pistol. The killer then got out of his car to shoot Ken again. However, Ken was also with his trusted German Shepherd. His police dog launched its jaws towards the shooter and dragged his arm. The struggle threw off the aim and gave Ken Oliver, who was still alive, time to run for cover inside a nearby house. But the killer continued to shoot at Ken. He was shot a further 6 times. Despite being shot so many times, the officer was able to stumble inside a nearby home, all thanks to his trusted dog. However, the killer then turned his gun on the dog and fired. Now free from the German Shepherd, the killer managed to get away. PC Ken Oliver was rushed to hospital, and despite being shot 7 times, he managed to survive. And you'll be happy to know that his incredibly brave pooch, who took a bullet for his owner, managed to survive too, and I can imagine it was quite the reunion. The killer was on the loose yet again. He drove his brown car to a nearby forest and set fire to it, before vanishing on foot into the trees. And now, the biggest manhunt in UK history was underway. That night, Dalby Forest was filled with reinforcements from outside the county and as far as the Metropolitan Firearms Unit. An RAF helicopter drifted above the trees, and its infrared sensors hunted for any trace of heat among the bracken. Spikes were laid across tracks, and checkpoints went up. Through the hours of darkness, men kept watch along the forest paths, while search teams prepared to sweep the woods at dawn. Due to his elusive nature, the press called him the Phantom of the Forest. By now, 2 men were dead, a woman was maimed, and an officer had barely survived. Fear spread among the countryside, and a large media presence gathered. However, this killer was able to get through the cordon, and on the 28th of June, the killer came to Old Malton in North Yorkshire in the early afternoon. The Malton Police Department received a call from a local who claimed that a strange man had been loitering near a wall only a few metres away from the police station. An officer named Sergeant David Winter, along with a colleague, stepped out to check. David Winter spotted a man by a garden wall and stepped forward to question him. But this man was the killer. The reply came in an instant as a pistol was drawn and then fired. Winter threw himself behind a low wall and tried to pull back along the street, but the gunman ran around the end of it and shot him 3 times at close range. Residents watched in shock from their doorways. The killer then fired at a nearby journalist and TV crew before slipping away through an alleyway and then into some back gardens and allotments. Another officer was dead, and the killer had escaped yet again. Within hours, heavy rain fell as roughly 600 police officers, backed by dogs and helicopters, fanned out across the area, hoping to catch the Phantom of the Forest. The police were desperate with mounting public pressure. However, the clue that unmasked this killer had been there from the very start. The clue was written on the clipboard of Constable PC David Haig, the first victim of the killer. Now, the name was indeed false, but the date of birth, it looked habitual and not invented. A constable in West Yorkshire checked it amongst open warrants. Only one of them matched. A man due in court that previous January who had used another surname to commit previous crimes. A warrant took officers to a Leeds address which was tied to him. Inside this home were maps of Yorkshire and Lincolnshire. Fingerprints from inside the house matched those lifted from the burned citron. The police now knew who this killer was, but just to make sure they were right, a spread of photographs were shown to the wounded dog handler P.C. Ken Oliver, who picked out the same face with no hesitation, and with that, the order was given to release the name. Meet Barry Prudom. Barry was born in Leeds on the 18th of October 1944. Growing up, he was described as not particularly scholarly, but he showed early promise in sports, mainly in boxing and cross-country running. His teenage years held only minor brushes with the law. One such incident for housebreaking led him to a short stay at a young offenders institute in County Durham. After leaving school, Barry trained as an electrician through an apprenticeship. This was an occupation that became his steady line of work. In October of 1965, he married 19-year-old Gillian Wilson, and they had 2 children, a daughter born in 1966 and a son in 1968. In 1969, Barry enlisted in B Squadron of the Territorial SAS, which was the volunteer reserve based in Leeds. He participated in covert surveillance and training exercises, building military-style survival skills, which later assisted him in his killings. Despite his enthusiasm, he ultimately failed to complete the selection process, reportedly failing at the final initiative test. In 1979, his mother tragically drowned whilst she was on holiday, a devastating event that aided to his recent failings. Soon after, in 1977, his marriage collapsed. His wife left with their children and reportedly ran away with another man with around £8,000 of their own money. It was after this that he entered a period of instability. To support himself, he worked in the petroleum industry in Saudi Arabia. Following his divorce, Barry entered a new relationship and began travelling with a younger partner named Carol Francis. He continued working in the oil fields in North America, Canada and the US, earning well but living an unsettled, transient life. It was during his time in the United States that he acquired a pistol. He smuggled it back into the UK, where he carried it illegally without a firearms license. He was known to practice with it covertly, and even brought it when walking in remote areas. By 1982, Barry had become physically violent. He assaulted a motorist in Wakefield with an iron bar, and was arrested and bailed. He subsequently failed to appear for his Crown Court hearing. That led to a warrant being issued, and the start of his disappearance from public life. From then on, Barry Prudom became adept at living off the grid. He drifted between cheap bedsits and rural hideouts, where he could cook outdoors and sleep rough. He deliberately cultivated a low-profile rambling look, alternating between clean-shaven and a short beard depending on the week. He carried minimal gear, just a small rucksack with essential food and first-aid supplies. He even hoarded number plates taken from parked cars to conceal his vehicle's identity. His survival instincts were incredibly sharp. One acquaintance later recalled that he confidently claimed that he could disappear into the woods for weeks if he was pushed to. After all, he had his own copy of No Need to Die, a survival manual by an ex-SAS instructor called Eddie McGee. By June of 1982, that lethal combination of solitude, preparation, and small-scale weaponry had hardened into deadly action. After Barry's name was released, the search shifted focus. The official line spoke of renewed sweeps through Dalby Forest, but behind the scenes, the effort was tightening around Malton. The aim was to hold him in place to pressure him to move, and then catch him out in the open. People in the towns nearby were told to lock their doors and look for signs of sheds or outhouses that had been disturbed. Search parties continued to go through lofts, garden plots, and stores, noting every forced lock and missing tin of food. More experts were brought in, and amongst those brought in was Barry's idol, the author of the manual that he cherished, Eddie McGee, a former soldier and survivalist instructor. He explained how to read bent grass and broken spiderwebs at first sight. how dew changed when trodden, and how to best find a man with this kind of knowledge. McGee began at Old Malton. This is the area where the sergeant had been shot. From there, he traced faint signs through the edge of town, across hedges and into fields. He believed that Barry was closer than most realised, and still inside the town, or just on its fringe, and that Barry was not deep into the forest, like many had assumed. But then, on the 3rd of July, another terrifying encounter occurred. Barry entered the home of a family in Malton, and held them hostage. He tied them up, and then, with an unnerving calm, Barry cooked fried eggs and bacon, ate this, and then referred to this meal as his last supper to the family. He told them not to panic, spoke softly, and stayed with them for some time. According to the family, he talked to them like he had known them for years. At one point, he pressed a small keepsake into the hand of one of the hostages, a United States Army paratrooper ring, and then, before dawn on the 4th of July, Barry tied the family even more securely and slipped out into the night and vanished. The family were able to get themselves free at around 5:45 a.m. The family then phoned the police and relayed everything that Barry had said. Barry had told this family about the shooting of P.C. Haig. He said, "I was in a clearing and had been asleep all night in the car. This policeman approached me and questioned me. He mentioned something about me hitting a man with an iron bar in January. He was going to take me in, so I had to kill him." Barry also told them about the killing of Sergeant Winter. He said, "I feel sorry in a way, but not really. He was a policeman." And then the family told the police something chilling. Barry had told this family that his plan was to kill as many police officers as possible before they killed him. He said, "I am going to die, but I will not be the only one. There is nowhere for me to go now. Thanks for everything." It was at this moment that Barry left their home. With this information, search teams quickly moved, fanning out across nearby streets and fields. But then, McGee noticed something. He started at the garden path and found where dry shoes had brushed a line through the dew in the grass. The trail crossed a verge and a patch of short grass before turning into shrubs. Beyond lay a low-earth shelter camouflaged with bushes and debris. McGee and the police had finally found Barry's hiding spot. A team of armed men surrounded the hollow and called on Barry to surrender. Stun grenades were then thrown in to where Barry was hiding. But then there was a gunshot. Upon the gunshot being fired, the police opened fire on Barry's location. When the smoke cleared, they found Barry in the hiding spot, with a single bullet wound to his head. Shotgun pellets had struck his body. One had grazed his forehead, but he was dead before the teams even reached him. His .22 caliber pistol was found in his hand. The shelter, which was only a few hundred feet away from the police station, was searched in detail. Inside were food tins, a map, and survival gear. His pistol magazine still carried the same types of rounds used in the earlier shootings. Fingerprints were lifted from tins and the magazines, identical to those already on file. But most importantly, the largest manhunt in UK history had finally ended. The following inquest replaced the trial that never came. Firearms officers told how they had taken up positions, thrown distraction grenades, and then heard a single shot from within the shelter. They described their return of fire, the approach, and the sight of a man motionless with a pistol in his hand. The pathologist set out the injuries. There were 21 shallow shotgun pellet wounds on his limbs and torso, not deep enough to pierce the chest. There was one small caliber entry wound to his head with an exit wound on the other side, along with a superficial graze on his forehead from a pellet. But the inquiry did confirm that Barry was dead before the police got to the shelter. As time went on, the killings slowly receded from the headlines, and memorials were put up. Sylvia was left with permanent neurological damage from the attack that killed her husband, and she was able to rebuild her life in stages. Her neighbours kept watch over her in the years that followed. Officer Ken returned to duty shortly after surviving 7 gunshot wounds, and was later honoured for his bravery. He lived with scars until his death in 2011. His dog, whose intervention had saved his life, recovered after the surgery, and became a legend of the case. Barry was buried in an unmarked grave in Leeds. There were no public notices, no service. With the inquest closed and the exhibit stored away, the official record ended. But there was a single question unanswered. Why did he do this?